Hello, my name is Clive and I'm a director at Peak Accountancy Training. We provide online courses that you can use to study towards your AAT exams at levels 2, 3 and 4. If you are interested in any of our courses, please do visit our website www.peakaccountancytraining.co.uk. Well, in this recording, I'm going to be walking you through Task 1 of AAT Sample Assessment 2 for Principles of Costing, PCTN. Just a reminder about this exam. It has an allowance, a time allowance of 1.5 hours and is made up of a total of 7 tasks. The pass mark you need to achieve is 80 marks, which equates to 70% of the overall marks available. So let's have a look at task 1 then, which is worth in total 8 marks. Each task made up of multiple requirements, and we start off with a true or false sequence. And this true or false sequence is about making sure that we understand the role of financial accounting and management accounting. In reality, in many businesses, this could be a murky distinction between the two, but the general rule of thumb to follow, particularly for your AAT exams, is that financial accounting is focused on producing the financial statements of a business. That's to say, the statement of profit or loss and the statement of financial position. The reason for producing these annual statements is essentially for external stakeholders of the business. This could be investors, potential investors, banks and other lending institutions. It could be suppliers or indeed major customers. Management accountancy, on the other hand, is all about preparing information that can be used within the business to help the business to operate and to help the business to make decisions. They're the distinctions. So basically, management accounting information typically doesn't go beyond the walls of the business. Financial accounting information in the form of the published accounts is mainly for external use. So our first statement, the role of financial accounting is to help with decision making, both internally and externally, using published financial results. Now, the fact that this statement includes the term decision making, the fact that it's talking about internal and external decision making might start you along the path that this is all about management accounting. But the key phrase is right at the end of the statement, using published financial results. For that reason, I'm going to say that this statement is true because it's talking about financial accounting information, the published results of the business. And of course, they will be used by the management of the business as well to help them to see how well the business is performing and to help them to make decisions for the future. It's not just for external stakeholders. Okay, well, let's have a look at the second statement then, which says that the role of management accounting is to help with decision making externally. So external stakeholders that I was talking about, for example, shareholders of a business, potential investors into the business, banks and other financial institutions that might be interested in lending money to the business, customers, suppliers, for example. So their decision making in terms of whether to have sort of contractual relationships in the business. But using variance analysis and budgets prepared in advance. Now, these are types of analysis, types of reports basically, that typically a business would use internally to help it to understand the efficiency and the economy of its operations. So variance analysis and budgets are tools that a management accountant would use, but management accounts are very internally focused as far as decision making. So on those grounds, that particular statement is false. External decision making, well, the external users would have to put up with the published financial information. So finally, management accounting can incorporate much more than just monetary value, including, for example, hours, tons, litres and miles. Yep, it's true that for the published financial statements, the focus is very much on the financials. The financials in the profit or loss statement, the financials in the statement of financial position. Within the management accounts, we are interested in more than just the pounds, as it were. We are interested in all sorts of measures of performance, and that would include hours worked, doing a particular task, for example, the amount of materials used in production for a manufacturer, the distance travelled by trucks if we're a logistics organisation, or distances travelled to meetings by managers and other employees. Anything that basically can help us to measure the performance in terms of productivity, economy and efficiency of the business. So management information analyzes all sorts of data. So basically that statement is true. Okay, well the next requirement is looking at cost behavior, and there are three types of cost behavior mentioned in the question. You might remember from your studies that there is one other type of cost behavior you can come across in your assessment. Here we have a fixed cost, we have a variable cost, we have a semi-variable cost. The one that's missing from the list is basically a stepped fixed cost. So what we've got to do is basically identify which type of cost behavior the transaction is talking about. So we're starting off with the cost of electricity with a standing charge. So if we get charged for electricity, there are typically two components to that electricity charge. There will be a fixed element, which is just relating to the provision of electricity or power in the first place, but then on top of that, the user will be charged for the amount of electricity that they use, typically in terms of the kilowatt hours of energy that they are consuming. So there are two elements to the cost: a fixed element, which is the standing charge, which doesn't change. It's a fixed amount for the supply on a monthly basis, for example, and then you pay for the usage on top of that in terms of the units of energy. So that is an example of a semi-variable cost, part fixed and part variable. Now, what about an annual subscription? So an annual subscription, I would say that is a fixed cost. We know exactly how much the subscription cost will be, and it is fixed for the entire year. It is not going to fluctuate in terms of our usage. So what about production staff wages then? Well, typically in order to produce our costings, we will make the assumption that the labour cost of the production area of the business, the area of the business that does the work, if you like, makes the products, provides the service, that we can say that that is a variable cost. That enables us to cost tasks in terms of the number of hours that need to be worked to perform that task, and of course we can work out an hourly rate to complete our costing. So for production labour, we can make the assumption that the cost is variable. The more work we do, the more volume we produce, the higher the labour cost will be. So what about advertising then? Well, a bit like the annual subscription fees, we will pay a flat rate for advertising typically. So advertising, I would put that down as a fixed cost for the period. Raw materials used in production, again, like the production labour cost, raw materials used in production will be a variable cost. If we don't produce anything, then we won't be incurring any costs of materials. As we produce more and more, so we're going to have to bring more materials into the business. So with the greater volume, the total cost of materials will rise. That is a typical definition of a variable cost. So, as a summary, variable costs will increase in total with volume. Fixed costs will stay the same regardless of the volume of activity. Semi-variable costs are a mixture of the two with a fixed and a variable element. The fourth one that I mentioned that the question doesn't refer to is a stepped fixed cost. In other words, we have a fixed cost, but we will reach a point in activity where we need to take on more of that resource that the fixed cost is for. So a simple example would be the rent of buildings that we use, whether we're a producer, a manufacturer, or whether we're a service provider. We will rent offices or factory space. That rental cost will be fixed. It doesn't matter what we do within those premises, how much we do or how little we do, we've always got that fixed cost. But we will get to a point maybe where we have to make a decision that we just don't have the building capacity to expand our operations anymore unless we take on extra premises. If we do that, there will be a step in the fixed cost base. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of task 1 of sample assessment 2 for the PCTN exam.